Hey, friends, welcome back to the With Mrs. B podcast. This week, we are continuing to focus on relationships, but not just relationships at the surface level sense of what other people are doing, what they said, what they didn't say, what frustrates us in our relationships. This week, I want to go deeper. We get to look at the patterns that we as individuals bring into the relationships we have in our life. Because one of the most important parts of growth is realizing that relationship struggles are not always just about the other person. Sometimes they're about the habits and defenses and reactions and survival strategies that we have carried into the room and into the relationship. And most of the time, we don't even realize that we're doing it. We think we're being helpful, trying to keep the peace or just be strong. But when underneath these behaviors, we know there is often a pattern. There is this familiar way that we show up. And many times it's a protective response that kicks in before we even stop to think about it. And if we don't become aware of these patterns, they will quietly shape our relationships for years. So today I want to dig into the patterns that we keep repeating. So, what are the patterns that you keep repeating, how to recognize them, and why any of this matters? I want to really presence how awareness to these patterns can really begin to change the way that you relate, connect, communicate, and love in the relationships in your life. All right, so let's dig into it. So often, when relationships feel painful, our attention goes outward first. We notice the other person's tone of voice. Maybe they're keeping us at a distance. We notice disappointment or tension. We notice when in our relationships there's a lack of support or a misunderstanding or any kind of conflict. The way someone responded or didn't respond, those are the first things we notice. And of course, these things matter. We're not going to pretend today that other people's behavior has no impact in our relationships. It does. But if we are only ever focused on what is happening outside of us, we can miss something really powerful. What is happening inside of us in response? What do I tend to do when I feel hurt or unseen? What do I tend to do when I feel criticized or rejected or overwhelmed or insecure or just disappointed? Because in those moments, that's when our patterns surface. And the truth is, many of us are not relating simply to the thing that's happening in the present moment. We're relating from our old conditioning, our old beliefs and fears and emotional habits. We're relating from roles that we learned a long time ago, like a long time ago. And sometimes without even realizing it, we're bringing our past into our present relationships. Is this making sense? Anyone? We bring old coping strategies into our new conversations. We're bringing our past wounds into how we interact in our relationships today. These beliefs about what we actually need to do to be loved, accepted, safe, or just feeling enough in our relationships. And when we keep having that same old version of the same experience over and over again, we wonder why. It's because very often we're recreating these same experiences because of the pattern underneath it. So, I want to talk about what some of these patterns actually look like? And I want you to tune in and see if you can identify with any of these patterns. All right, first one. For some people, the pattern is people pleasing. You smooth things over, you say yes when you mean no, you minimize your own needs for the needs of others. You become highly aware of what everyone else needs and very disconnected from what you need. People pleasers work really hard to be agreeable and low maintenance and supportive and flexible. And on the outside, people pleasers look really generous. But underneath all of that, that pattern of people pleasing can really be fear. Fear of conflict, fear of disappointing someone, fear of not being liked or being misunderstood or just simply losing connection with that person. People pleasing. For others, the pattern might be over explaining. You feel the need to justify yourself and clarify everything, make sure that everyone understands where you're coming from or what's in your heart, and always needing to prove that your intentions were good. The over explainer often will defend their choices before anyone has even asked. And underneath that pattern can be a deep discomfort with being judged, misunderstood, or disapproved of. For others, the pattern is withdrawal. When things feel tense or vulnerable, you go quiet, you disconnect, you shut down. Individuals with patterns of withdrawal tend to keep things inside, and you tell yourself it's easier just not to say anything. And you often retreat emotionally before someone can do anything else or say anything else to hurt you or disappoint you or reject you. For others, the pattern is control. You manage and organize and fix and anticipate and just are hyper over functioning. You feel safe when everything is handled and planned and contained and predictable. And again, underneath that control, again, can be fear. Fear of uncertainty, of chaos, fear that things are going to fall apart or you're going to be let down. Another pattern is rescuing. You step in quick, you take responsibility for what other people are feeling or doing, you try to help before anyone asks for help, and you are regularly carrying emotional weight that isn't yours. You are considered the strong one, the dependable one, the fixer, the one who always holds it together. But over time, that pattern of rescuing turns into exhaustion and resentment and heaviness that you carry. And again, a very disconnected sense, like you're disconnected from your own needs. And there's the pattern of defensiveness. The moment that feedback comes in from anyone, your nervous system flares up and you feel accused or threatened or exposed or misunderstood. And even a really gentle correction or a really gentle offer of feedback feels like an attack, feels sharp, even if it's just an honest conversation. And before you know it, this defensiveness pattern means that you're protecting yourself instead of listening and learning. For some people, the pattern shows up as avoiding honesty at all. You don't want to say what's really true. You tell yourself now isn't the right time. You're afraid of getting it wrong. You keep swallowing what you feel and you're regularly trying to stay calm and composed and agreeable, but inside, resentment is growing. So these patterns can all look very different from person to person, but they all have something in common. And oh, by the way, we all have all of them at one point or another. but they all have something in common. If you picked up on this, they all usually start and did start a long time ago as protection. Let me say that again. All of these patterns have something in common. They all usually started as protection. And here's the part that matters so much about these patterns. These patterns don't mean that something is wrong with you. These patterns are not your whole identity or your character. They're not the whole truth about who you are. Of course not. Most of these patterns began as an attempt for you to survive something, to manage something, to avoid something, or to keep some sort of connection. And at one point, that pattern may have made sense. It may have kept you safe when you were quiet, or being helpful maybe gave you approval, or being easygoing kept the conflict down. Maybe when you were over functioning, it made life feel more stable and in control. Maybe taking care of everyone else at one point gave you a sense of worth. These patterns have always formed for a reason. But just because a pattern once protected you does not mean it is still serving you now. And that is the invitation of this work. Not to judge ourselves or feel shame about it, not to make the pattern that comes up mean that we're broken in some way, but really the work of being honest enough to say, this is something that I do. This is how I tend to respond. I'm noticing that this is a role I keep stepping into and a cycle I keep repeating. Shame and awareness are not the same thing. I've said this so many times. When we are doing this work of self awareness, transformation, and personal growth, it is not about saying, I am the problem. That's shame. It's about awareness, which is inviting us to know that there is something more for us to understand. When we're in shame, we're in defense mode. But when we're aware, that opens up the door to responsibility. And that's why, friends, this conversation matters. You cannot change what you won't acknowledge. But once you can name these patterns, you're no longer completely controlled by them. One of the most important questions you can ask is not just what is my pattern, but also what does this pattern cost you? What is this pattern I'm stuck in? This role that I show up in regularly? What is it costing me in my relationships? Because these patterns come with a cost. People pleasing can cost you honesty, authenticity about what is truly what you're needing and feeling. It can cost you rest, self respect. It can cost you relationships that are actually built on truth and honesty. When your rescuing pattern always shows up, it can cost you emotional peace and balance in your own life. It costs you the ability to maintain appropriate boundaries. And really, rescuing costs other people the chance to take responsibility for their own actions, choices, and growth. When you withdraw, it can cost you intimacy. It can cost you the ability to repair in a relationship, to be known in a relationship. It can cost you the opportunity to actually have conversations that can bring healing. The pattern of control can cost you trust, the ability to receive. It can cost other people the ability to have room to show up in their own way. Defensiveness costs you connection, it costs you learning, it costs you understanding, and it may really, hear this, cost the safety of other people to feel like they can be honest with you. Avoiding honesty can cost you freedom. It can cost you the kind of relationship where people actually know the real you. And avoiding honesty can cost you peace because what is unspoken doesn't go away. It just gets stored up inside you. Sometimes we keep repeating a pattern because it feels familiar. But, friends, familiar does not always mean healthy. Familiar does not mean aligned. And familiar definitely doesn't always mean safe. Sometimes it just means it's a practiced pattern. And there's a big difference there because what is practiced can feel automatic, and what is automatic can feel normal. And what feels normal can keep going unquestioned and unacknowledged for a really long time. And that's how we continue to bring these patterns into relationship after relationship after relationship in all the different places in our life until we slow down enough to notice. So, what do we do with all of this awareness and noticing? How do we actually start becoming aware of a pattern instead of just hearing this morning or this afternoon, whenever you're listening and thinking, wow, yeah, that sounds true. I can recognize that. And then going right back on autopilot. I'll tell you, we begin by paying attention to the moments when we feel our energy shift. When we pay attention, we know. It's when our body tightens, our tone changes. It's when we feel the urge to do all of these things like explain, defend, fix, withdraw, please, control, or go silent, whatever the pattern is. We get to notice what happens when we start to feel uncomfortable. That discomfort, that's usually where the pattern lives. This isn't things that we notice in the calm, easy moments of life when all our relationships are vibing. It's the parts of our relationships that feel uncomfortable. That's where our patterns live. In those activated moments, the moments that feel vulnerable, the moments where we feel misunderstood and dismissed, disappointed, embarrassed, insecure, unseen. That's where the automatic response comes online and takes over. So when you notice this, when you slow down and notice this, instead of rushing right past it, I invite you to practice pausing. Even if it's just to take a breath and ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? What story am I telling? What am I about to do automatically? What do I not want to feel here? What am I afraid actually might happen? And what role or pattern am I stepping into again? That pause is powerful because the goal is not to become robotic or hyper analytical about every single interaction. The goal isn't to like over monitor yourself, but it is to, again, just like with triggers, the triggers, they bring out our patterns. The goal is to create just enough space between that trigger and the response so you can actually see what's happening. And once you see it, you get the opportunity to choose. Maybe you don't choose perfectly or instantly, but you get to choose intentionally. And ask yourself, is this my pattern? Is this a choice I really want to make in this moment? Choosing differently doesn't always mean that it has to be something dramatic. It can just mean telling the truth sooner or saying no without over explaining, not fixing what's not yours to fix. staying present in those hard conversations instead of emotionally just checking out, allowing yourself to receive feedback without immediately protecting yourself, letting someone have their own feelings without making those feelings your job. Sometimes choosing differently is deeply internal. It means noticing that old urge and not following it. It means recognizing that familiar role and pattern, but not stepping into it automatically. We get to honor the younger parts of us that learned that pattern with compassion, and we know it protected us and served us. But we can also tell the truth about the fact that we don't want to keep living from it when it doesn't serve us now. Healing and growth and transformation is not just understanding why you do what you do. Healing, transformation, and personal growth is slowly learning how to respond as the person you are and are committed to becoming instead of the protection that you built up in the past. And friends, trust me, that takes practice. It takes awareness. It takes honesty. It takes compassion for yourself and others because we're all doing the work, and it takes courage. But every single time you notice the pattern in real time, it make even just a slightly different choice. You are building and creating something new, like self trust, alignment, healthier relationships, emotional security, and the capacity to stay connected to yourself while staying connected to others in the relationships you're in. That is powerful and really important work. So this week, we get to pay attention with honesty and curiosity. We get to pay attention to what we bring into the room. What happens when we feel uncomfortable? What do you tend to do? And then ask yourself, what might become possible if in this moment I chose differently? Awareness is where the change begins. We do not become a different person overnight. And you don't have to get it perfect and untangle every pattern all at once. You just get to notice, pause, and choose different. And over time, those new choices create different relationships, relationships that are more honest and peaceful and connected and mature and more free. Here is the most beautiful thing. Healing ourselves really changes the way we love and the way others love us. And I believe it begins with finally being willing to see the patterns that we have been repeating. Friends, you can come be part of a space where we are growing, reflecting, and taking this kind of intentional action together. So, check out the show notes to learn more about the community that I lead every day in helping you build a life you love. And until next time, I will catch you in the next episode. Be well.